Hi guys, my name is Ryan Eastley. I'm from the UK, well, South Wales in the UK, and this video is about how I went from being an electrician 7 years ago, fully qualified in the UK, to actually being a full-time property investor. And in that time period, I've built a seven-figure property portfolio, and it's basically the problems, the good bits, the bad bits, and how I transitioned from being a full-time tradesman into a full-time property investor, and have grown two successful portfolio businesses in that time period. Let's go. So the first thing I want to touch on is my age, because I look very young, and the most common thing I get with anyone new that I meet who wants to work with me or work with us as a company is, you look young, so therefore you must have only started this yesterday. Now, I can understand the logic and the approach, but I've just turned 30 years old, believe it or not. Major shock, because I look about 12. It's a very common joke with myself and every new client or investor we work with. It's very common. So, 30 years old. I started property investing 7 years ago. Went full time with it around about I'd say about 3 years ago. I've been heavily investing since, and a big part of this video was realizing what I knew when I was an electrician, realizing that the salary, the income, and everything that I was doing would only get me so far. And I knew that property was a great way to build the wealth that I wanted, but to be able to do it quickly and efficiently, I had to go full time with it. Not to say that anyone watching this video has to drop their life and drop their job and everything. It's not the point of this video. It's more about the mentality towards it and the approach, and how I took a leap of faith, and the pros and cons of that came alongside it as well. So let's throw this back in time. It's the most logical way of doing this, because it allows me to kind of give a starting point as to kind of how this fills in from where I was to where I am now, etc. So currently 30 years old. This all started when I was around about 19 years old. And the reason I say that is I used to be sat there, end of my teenage years, with living at home with mum and dad, no ambition, no drive, no real clue what I wanted to do. I'd never had any clue what I wanted to do at all. And to be honest with you, I was sat in my room playing video games all day. School had finished. There was nothing really going on. And my dad was a manager at a buildings maintenance company. When I say buildings, commercial, that kind of stuff. So he worked with a lot of tradesmen. So electricians, plumbers, maintenance engineers, etc., etc. And it's genuinely extremely fortunate that was the case, because he walked in my room one day, my dad that is, he walked in my room one day and basically said, I have an opportunity for you. His company had just started a new department where they took on apprentices, or that was the idea being proposed, where they took on apprentices to basically join the workforce. Basically, cheaper labour, teach young people how it's all done, and provide opportunities, right? Typical apprenticeship type approach. And looking back, it's extremely fortunate, because it's put me in the position I am now, or at least allowed me the options to get to where I am now. So basically, long story short, come in the room, he said, look, we have an apprenticeship available. Do you want to do it? Bear in mind, I had no idea what I was doing in my life, had absolutely no real want to do much, just kind of sitting there a bit lost. So I took it. I said, yeah, whatever. I didn't really think much of it. Didn't really care too much. I thought, cool, electrics, very naive about it. Didn't really have a clue. Didn't know what electricity was, etc., etc. You get the point. You get the picture. So took on the apprenticeship, cracked on with it. And to put it simply, I loved the benefits of it, and I hated the experience of it. So the biggest conclusion I have of my 3.5 years of being a Sparky is, well, actually 7 years of being a Sparky, so 3.5 year apprenticeship, was that apprenticeships in general give you an amazing result in terms of qualification. It can set you up for life. The actual experience of being an apprentice was horrible, and yet so valuable to me. So apprentices in any workforce, especially tradesmen, are treated pretty poorly. You're pretty much cheap labour. You're a bit thick. You don't know what you're doing. You've got no experience. You're just there to kind of be laughed at and taken the piss out of. Excuse the French. But the amount you learn from that in terms of problem solving, in terms of being around experienced engineers, good and bad, was looking back is a game changer for me, because it's given me a much thicker skin. And being that I'm now growing a sales business and helping people build portfolios currently, and working with people and problem solving every day, I genuinely think it's a blessing in disguise at the time, which I didn't realize at the time. So that's really cool. But perspective is everything, right? So long story short, well, I say long story short, this is the whole long story element to this. 3.5 year apprenticeship, learned a lot. I was a very slow learner. In fact, I definitely still am. I tend to be a trial and error kind of person, and I think it's helped me with business, but it's also it's shown me the sort of person that I am through trial and error. So I used to make a lot of mistakes, be laughed at every day. My first year of my apprenticeship, bloody hated it. Excuse my French, sorry about swearing on the phone, but like on the camera, but it's just to put it bluntly, absolutely hated it. Just in terms of, you don't know what you're doing, you're just this kid who's a bit of dirt really. And I came home a few times crying to my parents. Bear in mind, I was 19, 20 years old, and I'd come home crying to my parents. Not the best experience, but genuinely builds character. You know, I think this is why people love the army, etc., because it's toughened you up a little bit. Now, not to compare an apprenticeship with the army, different calibers, but the point still stands. I think life experiences toughen you up, and that was a prime example of that. So, learnt a lot, had a lot of problems at the time, wanted to give up almost every single day. But again, it builds your character, and I genuinely believe that tough times create good people, in terms of create tough people mentally. And I see that now, currently, as a huge benefit, personally, especially when things go wrong. But that's for later on in the video. So 3.5 year apprenticeship, went to college, got qualified, blah, 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 nothing really to it. And that was all in Bristol, in the UK, and in South Wales. So yeah, that's basically the location of it, and it's where I lived. In terms of the being a Sparky, so after I did the apprenticeship, I did a bit of travelling as well. Wanted to kind of get away from electrics temporarily, just have a break, so I did that. Then I came back and then became a EICR electrical testing engineer. But basically, fancy term is I would turn up to properties, they have an electrical fuse board, and I would do the EICR, so electrical installation certificate for the property. And basically test electrics, do remedials if needed, fix electrics here and there. So it was more of like an advanced electrical level. So much better pay than being just a standard Sparky, because a standard electrician just does installations here and there, whereas the testing engineer, the salary is tend to be better. So obviously that was an incentive. I was London, I was travelling to London, South England, Wales, all sorts, a lot of travelling. So great times, great experiences. And it's almost like being qualified as an electrician taught me to be tough and realised that I knew nothing and that I had to learn in order to be competent one day. And then being an electrician who was testing electrics forced me to implement what I'd learned, and you have to, because you're trusted as a qualified engineer. It's a completely different approach. You're treated as competent at that stage, because you obviously are. And I think you have to have the confidence in yourself to kind of every day, even if you make mistakes, be able to rectify them. And I think the people skills side to it came in, because I did a lot of traveling in between all this, but the people skills side to it really helped as well. Because you're dealing with people every day, dealing with clients, dealing with problems throughout all this time, and from the past 11 years, is being one of the biggest benefactors of myself, like, in terms of just learning, education, etc. So every day you turn it to properties or buildings, let's say, testing electrics, dealing with clients, having the composed approach to it, where the priority is always solving the problem, taking the emotion out of it, and it's a trend, and it's the exact same thing we do today, you know. So that's been really cool. So just to backtrack on this, did the apprenticeship, got qualified, 3.5 years, then did electrics as testing for X amount of years. I actually got sacked as a Sparky as well, funny enough. So I had one testing job for about a year. And long story short, they didn't really, like, I had a great start for a few months, and then we had a change of management, and the manager hated me. Like, literally, sent an emails, text, and it was kind of just, the vibe wasn't there, and I didn't respond very well. And long story short, they basically sacked me, to be honest with you. Big learning curve. There's no entitlement in any of this, and it's just a case unless you actually do the job you signed up to, then for obvious reasons they let you go. So long story short, got a new job, cracked on with that, happy days. This whole time period of 19 to quitting the job was around about 7 years. So now I'll feed into how property came about in this story. So as I was saying, so basically you've got 7 years of partly apprenticeship, partly being qualified, testing electrics, doing remedial work, etc. And I'll tell you what, it got to a point where after about 6 years of it, I realised that I was around engineers, and I mean this so gently. I was around engineers, and bear in mind I was about mid-20s at the time, so about 25 years old. The engineers I was working with were so miserable doing what they were doing, working for someone else, 50 plus years old. Not all of them were 50 plus years old, but they were above 45. And I remember there were several times when I was sat down talking to these engineers, a cup of tea in the morning, etc. And all they would do is complain about the fact that they were in this position, that they were turning up, they were working, they were doing this manager's this manager, and it was just kind of complaining all day. And in my head, almost every day in the morning, I was sat there thinking, I do not want to be like that when I'm 50 years old. That's the biggest thing I can say. I don't want to be sat there at 50 years old complaining about the position I've put myself into. Now, that can be taken any number of ways, but that was just the thought in my head. Like, I don't mean that as criticising them. I don't mean that as X, Y, Z. I just knew that told me what I didn't want to put myself into in X amount of years. And it was a bit of a switch in my head where I'm like, how can I make sure that I'm not in that position where, not even monetarily, like not even from a wealth point of view, just in terms of turning up every day and just complaining about life, and it's not the positive sort of environment that I wanted to be myself in. After having spent 3.5 years being pretty damn depressed doing an apprenticeship, wanted to quit every day, persevering through that. I didn't see the point in persevering through the whole apprenticeship for 3.5 years to then be in a position for another 20, 30 years of just complaining and moaning every day. To me, doesn't make any sense, right? You want to persevere through the hard times to then have some sort of outcome that you're actually happy with, that's a positive outcome at least in theory. So long story short, that was what that switched in my head. I was like sitting there at that time thinking, I don't want to be like that. You know, lovely people, honestly, some of the best people I've ever met in my life, just in terms of being authentic, just in terms of being helping, but purely from the mindset of not being 50 years old and completely fed up and miserable. And being I was mid-20s at the time, I knew that I didn't want to be like that. So just to give some context on what this property spirit came from. And I also just want to add at this point how much respect I have for engineers. Just before this is seen as some negative rant about engineers and all the people I've been around, I genuinely, because of my experiences, have such an utmost respect for engineers. And it's partly the reason I actually wanted to get out of it, being testing electrics and doing remedial work in -5 in the snow in the winter never appealed to me. Doing that and your hands being blue and all this, the amount of respect I have for people still cracking on and doing that is up here. Ironically, it's obviously the reason I tried to get out of it, did get out of it, wanted to and eventually did get out of it. But like the amount of respect I have for people who still do that, who push on through that, it's something that I genuinely couldn't crack on with. I couldn't see through. So just want to clarify the amount of respect I have for engineers and especially Sparkies, just to clarify that before I give the wrong impression on this video. So I've had the idea, this is obviously a while back now, but I had the idea of basically finding something that would get me out of being an engineer, to put it simply. To kind of give you some idea on how this unfolded, I started on YouTube finding out about property through Jamie York. Jamie York has a YouTube channel where he's one of the leading providers in property education in the UK, and he's got a company called Aspire, which I looked on YouTube. Ended up going on their program, which was basically finding out about deal packaging, where you basically package deals up for investors and build them a portfolio. I didn't know anything about it. I just watched a few YouTube videos. I was incredibly naive, without a shadow of a doubt naive. It sums me up perfectly at that stage in life, where I just thought, oh, money, chase some money, happy days. So yeah, that was the gist of it, pretty much. There wasn't much more thought process. Property, people are rich, properties, people invest in property, make a hell of a lot of money, millionaires, blah, 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 blah. There wasn't much thought process. So I went on that program, did a couple of days education with them, etc., etc. Didn't see it being this huge life-changing thing. I wasn't really bought into it at that stage. I didn't really see where I was going. At the same time as all this, I'd actually just come back from traveling from Australia. I went traveling there for 9 months just to kind of get away from being a Sparky. I actually had enough funds there because I had quite a good job, a good salary with the electrician stuff. I actually bought my own house at that stage. So in theory, I had a good job. I had the house, all bought by myself, by the way. No misses. Well, I had a short-term relationship, but technically single at that time. And yeah, pretty much in theory, doing extremely well for someone in their early 20s. Only problem is I was like, okay, well, that's great, but how the hell do I get out of this in terms of the job? So I had the property, had the residential house, that's great. And I was trying to figure out a way of getting into property, for example, and having that match my salary. So I had an idea. So I got extremely lucky here because I bought residential property below market value, which means that I think it's worth about 160, bought it for about 130, something like that off memory. And so I had a bit of equity from day one, but the real luck about this, me and my dad renovated that residential property, and it was during COVID, right? The bridge toll in South Wales went, so there was a bridge toll in South Wales on the Severn Bridge that was operated and owned by the French people, by the French. They removed it. So the location of Chepstow, just over the bridge in South Wales where I lived at that time, but I still do, the property prices boomed, right? So they went up by 30, 40 grand overnight, extremely quickly. So suddenly I had a residential property, and I wasn't aware of this, to clarify, this just happened, I found out later on, they went up by about 30, 40 grand in value overnight. So what I did was one day I was just, had an idea, and I thought, let's contact my broker to see what my property's worth, because I bought it for X, did a bit of work on it, modernised it a little bit, carpets, flooring, etc., etc. I had the job. I was on furlough alongside it, as a lot of people know, furlough during COVID. So I had a bit of income coming alongside it. But long story short, I was thinking, okay, well, what's the equity? And my dad had a buy-to-let that he was renting out at the time. So I thought, okay, great, happy days. I can, see what the options are. Found out I had probably about 50 grand of equity that I could use in my residential. So overnight I just thought, well, why don't I just buy my dad's house? So, I didn't, again, crazy naive, but it was actually a bloody good choice in the end. I didn't even realise it, but it was an incredibly smart decision, but I wasn't aware of the whole picture at the time. I just thought, oh, equity, house, ticking the box, cool, let's do it. Income, happy days. What could possibly go wrong? So literally, long story short, contact my broker, use the equity in my residential to buy my dad's buy-to-let. So at 25-ish, I had my first buy-to-let and I had residential. So it's pretty damn awesome. I'm not going to lie. I was really proud of myself. Didn't even know how I was doing it or what I was doing, but I had income coming in from salary. Furlough was being ended, so my salary was come back anyway. So good job, residential and buy-to-let. So on paper, looks amazing, right? The problem was I was sat there with still this nagging thought of how the hell do I get out of electrics? I'm still working 60 plus hours a week, not crazy hours. I love working, but you're still sat there thinking, how the hell do I get out of this? Like, how the hell, there must be a way of me getting out of this sparky stuff without completely losing everything. Because now I'm actually bringing on more responsibility. I've now got an asset and a liability in terms of a buy-to-let and a residential house. But how do I get out of this without losing it all? So ironically, I'm putting myself in a worse position in a weird way. So what I realised was I was making a minimum $2,500 net every month from salary, minimum, right? Often $3,000, but just for this video, just for context, $2,500, let's say. I was making net monthly income off the buy-to-let £250. So I was going for a walk one day and thought, okay, simple maths, if I just got 10 of these, I'm literally matching my current income, net income after taxes. So I was like, why not just buy 10? Save up, buy 10, save up, save up, buy one, save up, buy one, do it that way. So my heartfelt mission at that time was just to save every single penny I had to be able to build a portfolio. The Aspire Education, all these training providers I was looking at online, it wasn't of interest too much at that time. It was more just a case of just saving, buying. Bear in mind that I didn't even know much about property investments. I just saw buy-to-let numbers, rental income, happy days. I was, again, very naive, extremely inexperienced. Didn't have a clue what I was doing, apart from just winging it, to be honest with you. And all I saw was bought for this, rent out for this, cross your fingers it works, happy days. So didn't know about locations or anything like that, right? So basically that was the plan, save up. And I realised if I could save at least, I believe, around about 20 grand a year out of my salary, I could buy a deposit and just keep on buying it that way. If they need a bit of work, I could do it myself and just keep accumulating. So I could do one a year pretty much, save for 9 months, 3 months purchase, keep buying that way, happy days. So within 10 years, I could get the portfolio that I wanted. Now, the problem with that is I am impatient, which for a property investor is not a good thing, but I am quite an impatient person. If you talk to my mentor, talk to my parents, talk to my missus, talk to anyone, I am an impatient person and I want to get things done and I don't like waiting. I don't like waiting for other people. I don't like waiting for things to get in the way of stuff. I don't like the idea of waiting a decade to build a portfolio, which as a property investor is not a good thing. We can go on to that later on, but it's not a good thing. But I didn't know that at that time. So long story short, I thought, how can I speed this up? So I got a good job, good salary that I'm trying to get out of. I've got one property there, technically two, but let's call one because it's from the investment point of view, it's one buy-to-let. So I had one property there. How can I scale this a lot quicker? And my thought process was get educated to learn how to do this a lot quicker. So I went to Aspire, I went to Progressive Property as well in Peterborough, Rod Moore, etc.'s training provider, so property training platform. Basically did the same course with both companies, deal packaging, where you basically find an investment property, sell it to an investor. And I didn't know why that was the one I went to. I just genuinely, it was just what I saw from YouTube. Again, very naive. I saw all that stuff on YouTube, but I thought, sounds cool. Quick money. You see the headline figures, suddenly you've gone from 0 to 10 grand a month. A lot of lessons were learned in that first year, a lot. When I say the first year, the plan was to get on board with the property stuff, to learn it, to do it alongside. So what I would often do is I'd be training with the provider, so Progressive Property, for example. I would be working alongside it, and then I would basically be coming in from the hotels at night, study, attack this, what can I learn, what can I squeeze into my 2 hours after work, and then go to bed. That was my process. It's basically absorbing as much information as possible so that I can speed this whole thing up. It got to the point where I realised that wasn't enough and I needed a mentor. So I got a mentorship through Progressive. Shout out George Scott. So literally got mentored with it and did the same principle, with the idea now of having someone who's experienced be able to teach me to fire this up and really get it sped up that way. And same process, literally get home from work, squeeze every single hour possible into learning and speeding this whole thing up. So long story short, that's what we're doing. The idea then was to build a company that was basically sourcing. So sourcing portfolio building company in South Wales, where I could have my salary go up here in terms of my 20 grand a year being saved up here. Then I would use the portfolio growing company, the sourcing company, to basically build a pot up here, and then just invest. So again, 2 streams of income and then invest it that way. Problem was that to make this sourcing company work, I had to sacrifice the engineering, the Sparky stuff, because to put it simply, I'm not a fast learner. I was making so many mistakes. I was burning a lot of bridges with just kind of messing things up, and in terms of just everything, to the point where I wasn't learning quickly enough to make this work, to make the sourcing work. I was pretty much just going in blind. I was just winging a lot of stuff, and I made every mistake in the book in that first year, from trying to package deals to kind of have this pot of money made up where it was all about the money and not about the service. But I didn't know that back then. I didn't know anything about the company. I didn't know anything about how it all worked or how to even make this an actual business. I just thought of saving a bit of money and then just chuck it back into the portfolio and get it built quicker, right? So yeah, that first year of property was purely just messing everything up. So again, I was still working alongside of mine. I was still, for the first, year or so of this whole thing, I was still working alongside it. It did get to a point though where I'd had enough of myself making so many mistakes, and I realised that the only way to really make this work, and I was sat in a hotel thinking this one night actually, the only way to make this work is not spending 1 hour a day doing this, but to either go part-time with it, so part-time with work and part-time with property, or to just go all in. So my logic flipped from saving 20 grand a year and saving X amount from the sourcing to, okay, I've saved this money with my savings. I can live off that. Why don't I just attack the property to build it up quicker to then get to my 2.5 grand income anyway? So why don't I just do that? Speed the knowledge up, speed the experience, speed the portfolio up essentially, and attack that. Why don't I just crack on doing that, right? So that's what I did. I took the leap. I quit my job. And yeah, I went all in. I knew I had the qualifications. I knew I could always go back to being a Spark, and I still can. I've got a lifelong certificate for it. I've got lifelong qualification. But I also knew that if I didn't take the leap now, being at that time, knowing that I was early 20s, chances are I was going to be hard to get into anyway. Chances are I would end up having a family in 10 years and it would be more difficult. So now is the time to do it. So I took a leap, quit a job, cracked on with building the sourcing company, still making a hell of a lot of mistakes, but learning as I went on because I was doing it every day. And I know myself that I have a very addictive personality where if I text something and I get my head down doing it, it's like an ADHD thing. When I get my head down with it, I can hammer it. And it's something I've learned about myself the past 5 years. When I've focused on something, I really, really get into it. And that's what I did. I pretty much cracked on. I did double figures in my second year of property in terms of sourcing deals. So, and the reason for that isn't an ego thing. It's more of a case of I was actually getting some sort of momentum in it. Still don't have a clue what I was doing. Don't get me wrong. I was still lost from a business point of view. And in some cases still am today. But from the point of view of actually just having some sort of income and cash flow from a business perspective, it was finally working to the point where I was like, okay, this actually may work. I may actually be able to survive this business. Bear in mind, I had no business knowledge at all, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just thought, okay, find property over here, somehow find an investor, bring them together, sell the deal. Happy days. I won't bore you with details on how that works for now, but the point is that was the logic at that time, right? So we've recapped basically on the electric side, the mentality, the approach, gone quite in depth into kind of, the reason for this existing, the reason for me getting into property, etc. Realizing that, the income that I was getting was going to take a long time to build that way. It's not a bad thing, but it's also a case of I just didn't want to be an engineer. I just knew that for a fact. So I got to a position, like I said now, where I was getting into property, making a lot of mistakes. The first year was just make every mistake in the book, honestly, burning bridges, kind of not doing things right, being so desperate for money that it didn't work well. And one thing I've learned in that time period is if you chase the money, it's going to run away. Whereas if you chase helping people, if you prioritize helping people, it's going to benefit you the best as much as them, So it's kind of like, if you actually try to help people with what you do, that's the best way of making this work. So from the second year onwards, it clicked on my head where I'm like, the whole reason that I started property was to build a portfolio alongside what I'm doing. I had income, I just didn't have the experience and knowledge. So by getting into property myself, I put myself in a position where I now had the experience and knowledge in the team to build a portfolio, and I also know what it's like to be like. I also know what it's like to be like an engineer who has the money but no time and knowledge to get into this. So it's a case of, wait, why don't I just help the people that I used to be like, in that position I used to be in? And that's exactly where this came about. Because my whole mentality from that point onwards, from the second year onwards of being in business, was literally to help the person I used to be. Because I know that back then I was like, I want to not even get out of it. Like a lot of people I talk to are like 50 years old and want a retirement part. They don't want to get out of it. They just want to kind of have a legacy and build it for their kids, right? But it's the exact same approach because they don't have the time or knowledge to get into property. They just have the capital they want to use to get into it, which is where we come in. So long story short, second year really changed it for us. I got a new mentor. And to be honest with you, that was a game changer. Having the right mentor for me has been an absolute game changer to the point where I can't describe. To the point where when I got involved with that mentor, it took me about a month to get used to things, but then almost overnight, my company profits quadrupled. It wasn't all monetary as well. The profits weren't just monetary. The amount I learned in that process, it became more about helping people authentically to help me build a business than just thinking, oh, money, 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 money. Because if you look to take, just keep taking, it's just a negative approach. If you look to give and help people because you can, because you're in a privileged position because you know what you're doing to be able to do that, that's the best approach with all this. That's something I learned really quickly in that process. So yeah, hope that gives a bit of clarification on that. So yeah, basically the business really quadrupled, did extremely well, and it allowed me to scale up in that sense. Now we're at a point where so that source of company's built up a lot. We're probably helping at least 150 people a year at the moment. And these are people who, like I said, have money, no time or knowledge, and they reach out to us. We've got to the point now where we're helping people from Asia, got a couple of clients in Dubai, America, London, Scotland, south of England, Bournemouth, Cornwall. Everyone from anywhere works with us. And it's genuinely a case of all these people have money but no time and experience, and this is the trend. And like I said, it's kind of just being able to help people who were in that position before, just to give clarity. That's been a game changer for us in terms of helping people. Now, what I also realised was that alongside doing all this sourcing stuff, the whole point of the sourcing was to build the profits, to build a portfolio ourselves so that we can help people build a portfolio alongside us building our own. So that parallel effect. But what I realised was, why don't I just also raise finance to build my own alongside it? So instead of just using company profits, I can also help the company to build other people's portfolios whilst also raising capital to build our own. So this is where it gets really interesting, because I talk about making mistakes, and the biggest lessons I've ever had are business partnerships. And the reason I say that is it's one thing helping someone from a service point of view where they come to you and you help them build a portfolio. One of the biggest problems I've ever had has been trusting the wrong people too closely. Business partnerships can be amazing, but because they're like marriage, people's good and bad sides come out over time. And one of the biggest things we've ever had, biggest issues I've personally ever had, was simply, I guess, trusting the wrong people and it coming out to bite me in the end. And I guess true colours being shown. So not to be too negative on this video, but one of my biggest lessons is kind of not trusting people too much until time shows when things go wrong. When things go wrong, people show their true colours, and it's kind of give someone enough time to kind of work with you to see how they work when things go wrong, to see whether they're set there pointing fingers or whether they're sat there focused on a solution. Again, there's lots of variables with this, but like it's like a marriage. But the point is I'm getting to is one of the biggest things we started doing in my second and third year was basically building our portfolio. And there's people that I worked with at the time who I wanted to kind of work with to build a portfolio quicker. So my thinking was I can focus on the sourcing and scale that up. I can work with these other people to kind of build a portfolio a lot quicker. Happy days, in theory. Problem was, sourcing company was doing well. Doing well to a point. Like it was a lot of struggles, but it was growing slowly. The joint venture partnerships and all that kind of stuff started off extremely well and positive until I got to the point where I found out I was actually being screwed. So the biggest lesson I had there was not trusting people too easily. And it's a case of like one of the biggest things that we do at the moment with the sourcing is we have 3 options. Option number 1 is work with us on fixed loans. Option number 2 is build your portfolio. Option number 3 is joint venture with us. The most lucrative one is joint ventures, but we don't do anything with anyone now on a joint venture basis until we've worked with said person for at least 12 months in either angel loan capacity or sourcing capacity, just purely from a trust builder to make sure we're a good fit. Because things go wrong in property all the time. Things go wrong in property all the time. It's one of the most common things that we all know about as property investors, and it's been an eye-opener. But what's more important is I know my approach when things go wrong to say, okay, what's the solution? Not to rush the solution, but what is the solution to this, to resolve it quickly, to move on to the next thing. And it's been an eye-opener when things go wrong and people pointing fingers or they're looking for a solution. And that's been a big eye-opener in terms of business. So again, not to be too negative in this video, but I'm definitely a bit mentally scarred of all that, to be honest to do. But it's a massive learning curve, one of my biggest. So just to paint a picture on all this, so obviously those JV partnerships are now scrapped and gone anyway. But currently in 2024, the end of 2024, after all this time of building the sourcing company, working with a lot of people, helping a lot of people, and also building our own portfolio. I've recently started a new company now to build my own portfolio a lot quicker. So that's great. So currently I have one company over here sourcing, so building other people's portfolios, another company over here myself, building my portfolio. So we're still doing a parallel metric, if that makes sense. So experience helps a lot in property, you can tell. So making mistakes, working with the wrong people, right people, learning, growing, etc. The conclusion to all this is we're currently sat here now with, I've got a portfolio in my personal name that is doing quite well, but that for tax efficiency reasons, everything now goes through a limited company. Any experienced property investor will say the same thing. So for example, whenever we work with a client now, we get them a limited company open first and then invest that way. But just for our own portfolio, for context, we've invested in commercial, we've invested in commercial to residential, we've invested in semi-commercial, to be fair, as well. We've done HMOs, we've done all sorts, singlets. The reason I'm mentioning this now is despite everything that we've done, and my mentor totally agrees with this as well, despite everything that we've done and every strategy we've done, despite being quite young, my conclusion is we only do singlets now. So if anyone wants to work with us, we only do singlets in South Wales for this exact reason. That can be HMOs on a joint venture, that can be buy-to-lets from a sourcing point of view, etc., etc. But in terms of the seven-figure portfolio we have, ego aside, because I hate saying it about seven-figure, but just to give some context on the video, because of doing HMOs, because of doing semi-commercial and commercial conversions, etc., etc., and the experiences and the headache that comes with all those projects, I love single-let, low-risk, high scalability projects. Also projects, I mean strategy types. So single-lets, low risk, accumulate a portfolio of them, diversifying your risk, happy days. So that's what I do, and that's what we've built, and that is what my seven-figure business is based upon. And that's exactly what we help people invest into who come out to us as well, for context. So I hope to God that I've explained my story a bit better, or at least clearly. Probably haven't, because I can ramble for days and go off topic a lot, as you can tell. But yeah, to hope that gives some clarity in all this. And to be honest with you, I just want to kind of outline where things stand now. So obviously, like I said, I've been investing for 7 years in total, 3 years full time. We've really grown a company so well. And for us, it's genuinely a case of, can we help said people get to where they want to go? Because a lot of people come up to us saying, like, I've got money in the bank, but I don't even know what my options are. I always recommend booking a call with us in that case, because at least then we can see how to help you. Because I've talked to different people in terms of, I've talked to multimillionaires who don't have any time whatsoever and want to get in property. I've talked to people who have like 20 grand in there, and they're also a bit lost. So it doesn't matter financially where you are, it doesn't matter where things stand. For context on this, just to give outline as to kind of our metrics for clients, if you've got 30 to 50 grand, we tend to edge towards the angel investor route, which is a fixed loan period for X amount of time. If you've got between over 100 grand, we get you your portfolio built, but we can also work with you if you've got 80 grand. If you've got over 300 grand in the bank, we tend to look at the JV route, which is our most lucrative and best option by far. But financially, you need to be in that position. So we've currently scaled to a stage now where we can build people's portfolios, but it's also a case of doing the fixed loans with them and doing JV partnerships with them, because they're very lucrative. Fixed loans are the least risk option, because it's just a fixed loan, money in, money out, profit over X period. With the sourcing, we build someone else's portfolio, but there's a lot more criteria to work with there, because they're literally taking on all the risk. With JV partnerships, it's split risk, because obviously we're 50-50 split on everything. They put the money in, we do the work. It's by far our best option, because it means we can build a substantial portfolio, but that's why the capital required is so high, at least 300 grand. We actually might even raise that to £1 million by the end of next year as well. So that's going to be scaling up quickly. But the JV partnership option with us is definitely the most financially beneficial and the most lucrative. And the people who work with us in that sense have to put so little effort in, apart from just creating a company together. But more on all that. So long story short, if you're looking to get into property, and you resonate with the story at all, and we feel like we could help you at all in any way, shape or form, reach out. I'll put a link to booking a call with us in the description to this video. So if you go on the description to this video, there'll be a link in there to the website where you can book in a call. The call's with us. There's no pressure on a call. We literally are there to help you. Like all the sales side and whatever, like I've based the entire business off helping people who are where I used to be. Not age-wise, because I look 12 years old, but just in terms of circumstances. So they've got money in the bank, they've got no time. You may not even want to get out of the job straight away. But even if you want to continue working, you're 50 years old, you want to continue working, but you want to build a retirement pot, it's the exact same approach. You're still building a cash flowing portfolio to build your wealth in the background. Or you do a fixed loan with us, which is the easiest way to work with us, where you can literally put money in and then you get interest every year, fixed returns, and you can build it that way. So, long story short, if you want to reach out to us, book in a call, and we'll go from there. And like I said, we've helped over 150 people a year, bare minimum. And we do have caps on how many people we work with because everything we do is one-to-one. We literally make a 5-year plan with every single person we work with. A 5-year plan to say, you are here financially and your goals. You want to be here financially with your goals in 5 years' time from a cash flow point of view and from an equity point of view, and you want to just have more time with your kids. This is the plan. So booking a call with us if you want to. Looking forward to speaking with you all, and hope you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.